Delhi police put out an advisory last night where it's cautioning that if any of our viewers are going to be planning to come to central Delhi, then post 9 a.m. they should avoid doing so till at least much later in the day, because there's going to be high security movements, high profile movements, and amidst this kind of security that exists, certainly, of course, one can expect huge traffic snarls and disruptions in the central part of Delhi. But let's also shift focus to Lok Kalyan Marg. Pragya is joining us there. That's where the Prime Minister's residence is, and that's where we saw an over 3.5 hour long meeting take place yesterday. Pragya, take us through what you're picking up from that particular meeting that took place, and when do we expect the Prime Minister to come out of Lok Kalyan Marg and participate in all of these series of events welcoming the Russian President to New Delhi today? Pragya.
Well, Madhav, Prime Minister Narendra Modi hosted a private dinner for Russian President Vladimir Putin. It was a very, benevolent gesture also on the part of Prime Minister, the way he hosted Vladimir Putin, and also the fact that they both came in the same car. And this is also in reciprocity of the warmth that has been extended to Prime Minister when he went to Moscow. And not just that, there was also a message, Madhav, which was Prime Minister and Mr. Putin both traveled in a Nova car, which is also a Fortuner car, and which is also a message of Make in India. So by every gesture that Prime Minister also extended to Mr. Putin, there is also a message for the world. Made in India is what the Prime Minister is looking for as far as the deals and agreements are concerned. Secondly, Prime Minister also gifted a Gita translated in Russian to Vladimir Putin. Everyone is looking at whether Prime Minister and Mr. Vladimir Putin will have a talk over the Ukraine issue or not. We will see, and we will get to know when the press statements will come. But Ukraine war is certainly going to be one of the issues that everyone is also watching, why everyone is watching this meeting very closely. Apart from that, there has been many talks, what we are gathering from the sources, that we want to, unclose and also the untapped potential that is
the
between
visit
the two
of
countries
Russian President Vladimir Putin. And, clearly it's going to be high on optics as well. Pragya, stay on with us. Let me go across to my colleague Isha as well, who's live with us from Rajghat. Isha, good morning. So after the ceremonial welcome at Rashtrapati Bhavan, President Putin is going to go to Rajghat, where the wreath-laying ceremony is going to happen. Take us through the kind of arrangements that are in place there.
Hina, I'm currently reporting from the Rashtrapati Bhavan. We are expecting the Russian president to arrive here at around 11 a.m. You can see here that security arrangements have been heightened here. In fact, we've also been asked to step away from the main entrance. We're standing slightly away. You can see that this entire area has been barricaded. And towards the other side as well, requesting my camera person to show the visuals as well. More police personnel coming in. But today, all eyes are on India, all eyes set on the high-level bilateral meeting between Russian President and Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And the stakes are extremely high, Hina, also considering that India is one of the world's largest growing economy, and India is one of the largest buyers of oil from Russia as well. In fact, the entire world is currently looking at Russia and India and the bonhomie at display. We have seen a gesture by the Prime Minister. He broke protocol, went to pick up Russian President Vladimir Putin from the airport. We saw them share a car as well. And today we see a packed schedule. We see Vladimir Putin will be here at around 11 a.m. In fact, we're expecting that he will be visiting the Rashtrapati Bhavan twice. Before leaving, he will also be paying a visit to Draupadi Murmu here in the national capital before leaving. So yes, stakes are extremely high. All eyes at the national capital. A lot of the bilateral is expected to take place between the Prime Minister and the Russian President. A lot of key issues to be discussed, but definitely all eyes on India today.
All right, and let me get in a quick word from Dipankar as well. Dipankar is at Rajghat, where the Russian president is expected to arrive following his visit to the Rashtrapati Bhavan. Dipankar, what time are we looking at President Putin reaching there? It's of course going to be a very short visit to the Rajghat, where he will formally pay respects to the father of the nation. Take us through what we're expecting there, Dipankar.
Well, we are currently standing at Rajghat, where the Russian president is expected to arrive at around 11:30, along with the Prime Minister, and pay homage to the father of the nation. And from here, then he'll move on towards the Hyderabad house. And as my cameraman can show you, we've been asked to move away from the Rajghat because the security personnel are being deployed over here. The Delhi police is being deployed over here, and the security over here is being beefed up. But this meeting that is going to happen today, after the Russian president pays homage to the father of the nation and goes to the Hyderabad house, the meetings that are to happen at the Hyderabad house are very important and very crucial, where global eyes are upon those meetings and the announcements that are to be made after those meetings are held at Hyderabad house and the MOUs are signed. All the eyes of the nations, of every nation, is on these meetings and the MOUs that are being signed, because as we know that Russia is a long-term standing ally of India, and there has been trade between India, so we'll also be expecting a brief up of those trade that happens between India, and also see there a beef up in the military trade, the defense trade that that has happened. So all the eyes of the entire world are on those meetings that are to happen at Hyderabad house after the Russian president leaves Rajghat.
Well, absolutely. And in fact, let's quickly open this up to our guests as well. I'm going to request all reporters to stay on with us, because one of the most important aspects is, of course, of trade. There is one issue, of course, which is the huge imbalance in trade between the two countries. We're talking about $64 billion that Russia exports to India, whereas India's exports to Russia are only around $5 billion. And there's, of course, the larger issue of oil, a continuing amount of pressure coming in from the United States to try and reduce Indian import of crude coming in from Russia. Let's quickly bring in our guests and try and look at those aspects and what really is the big announcement that we expect on those grounds. Let's take it across to our guests who are joining us for more on this. We will in fact take it across to Prabhu Dayal, former diplomat. Pratik Peng is a geopolitical analyst joining us. Rami Desai, author and distinguished fellow of the India Foundation, is with us. We have Surya Jayanti, senior fellow of the Atlantic Council and former US diplomat, who's with us. We have Michael Owens, Mayor of Mableton, US, also joining us, and Peter Kuznick, author, professor of history and director of Nuclear Studies Institute at the American University. Let me start with you first. Prabhu Dayal, what are we expecting? We have seen, of course, how India had increased its import of crude from Russia under pressure from the United States, as we all remember, during the Biden regime. The Trump regime has a very different approach and has been pressuring India to cut down on those imports of crude, and particularly with the sanctions kicking in, we have seen those numbers coming down. What are we looking at in terms of today's meeting, and in terms of your expectations? Are we likely to see any kind of formal announcement in this regard? Mr. Dayal.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on your show. Let me mention that while India has indicated to the United States that it would try to reduce oil imports from Russia, there is no indication whatsoever that we will stop buying, because oil purchases from Russia suit us in terms of their economic advantage. We get a huge discount and we need oil. Now, let me mention there is a lot of talk about the huge trade imbalance, that Russia's exports are much, much more than those of India. This is because of the energy supplies from Russia. And frankly, we should not worry too much about this trade imbalance, because we are getting the oil at such discounted rates. And this oil purchase is, affecting the trade imbalance. Let me also mention that the ongoing talks between India and Russia will look at a number of issues. For instance, of course, the United States is pressurizing us in regard to oil purchases, but we are trying to see how we circumvent the problem and put in place payment systems which would not impact our purchases. The payment systems could be either directly in local currencies, rupee, ruble, or they could be in third country currencies. So let me put it this way. The situation is very fluid. We do want a good relationship with the United States. We don't want the US to be upset about our oil purchases. But, and this is a fundamental but, we have to look at our own needs and requirements.
Right. Well, absolutely. And Pathikrit Payan, I would like to talk to you a little bit about what Mr. Dayal mentioned just now on the issue of oil imports specifically. We also know the sanctions that have come on two Russian firms, the oil firms there, that in a way have spooked the Indian oil companies as well. And as a result, if you look at the data in December, in fact, our oil imports from Russia are expected to hit a 3-year low. So do you think perhaps some kind of a conversation from Russia's side to India, could be there on, what should India really be doing, even though for India it's nation first? Of course, there are threats from Donald Trump as well, but then there are sanctions which we can't really ignore.
Good morning. The Americans have a very nice way of imposing sanctions and having an escape route at the same time. You see, the sanctions are not on the Russian oil. The sanctions are on two Russian oil exporting companies, which means that there are ample opportunity to circumnavigate them and to procure the oil from other Russian companies. Now, the modalities of that will be worked out, which means as of yet, yes, we do witness there has been a 1/3 reduction in terms of the procurement of oil from Russia. But at the same time, there are certain companies in India which continues to procure the Russian oil. What can also happen in the larger context is to find out which are those companies. Number two, you can have a larger, matrix of, negotiations on procurement of not just oil, but also Russian gas. Remember, the biggest, importer of Russian gas has been Europe, which is literally having huge problem because of the sanctions they have themselves imposed on Russia. So the larger context of India's energy security would depend, number one, on finding out other alternate opportunities for oil, and secondly, gas. And at the third, if you look at the small modular reactors in which some major amendments are being made by government of India in terms of allowing private sector to come in, the potential possibility of the Russians being part of it, because India does have a plan to have something around 100 gigawatt of nuclear energy by 2047. I think Russia would continue to play a very critical role so far as India's energy security is concerned, and it need not be restricted only to oil only. Back to you.
Right, let me take that question across to Surya Jayanti. Mr. Surya Jayanti, there's an increasing sense here in India, particularly given what we've seen over the last few months. And of course, America has its own shift in policy when it comes to President Trump, where the policy priority is to, rebalance the trade that exists, and also the method of doing that is tariffs. But, when you use such methods, such as 50% tariffs, that too with countries which are in some kind of a strategic partnership with you, there is a sense over here in India that there is a bit of a myopic view, because you're not looking at the larger strategic and diplomatic concerns that India might itself have, historic positions that India has taken, and therefore that kind of a pressure tactic from the United States is perhaps likely to be counterproductive, because even as other panelists have been saying, the latest move of sanctions also, now perhaps we are looking at some way of them being circumvented, because at the end of the day, India does need that Russian oil. Surya Jayanti.
That the United States' approach to dealing with India in the current administration has been counterproductive. I see very little U.S. interest that is gained by alienating India, and certainly India's concerns that it is being unfairly bullied or subject to standards and requirements that are not then applied to other countries, for example, other countries that buy Russian crude oil, is valid, and it is manifesting, we now see, in an increasingly close relationship between India and Russia to some extent, and also on the other side between India and even China. Now, of course, India and Russia have had a close relationship for a long time, but there have been different power balances. And what we're seeing right now is that Russia really needs India. And I think you're seeing Vladimir Putin pay a great deal of respect and homage to India, because he is essentially coming to beg. He is incredibly short of people. He has lost huge numbers in his war in and on Ukraine. He has a state budget that is entirely dependent, 30+%.
Well, that's a very relevant point that you have made, ma'am, that Russia also in a way is facing geopolitical isolation, and that's why it also needs India. That's an important point you've made. We'll of course be, talking about it in just a bit, requesting all my guests and all my colleagues to please stay on with us. We're slipping into a very, very short break, viewers. We'll be back with lots more. Don't go anywhere.